Hello everyone, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present today. Today we would like to talk about a topic that seems very simple, but it is actually much more complicated than we expect. That topic is giving advice. All of us give advice in our daily lives. Sometimes we give advice to our friends, sometimes to our family members, and sometimes even to people we are not very close to. For example, we say, you should go to bed earlier, or maybe you can try another way. Okay, we are already giving advice. However, giving advice does not always lead to positive results. Even when our intention is good, the listener may still feel uncomfortable or pressured. This makes us wonder, why does advice sometimes help and sometimes hurt?
That is why today's presentation is not about whether advice is right or wrong. Instead, we want to focus on how advice is given and how it makes people feel. We will look at different ways of giving advice, including direct advice, indirect advice, and softened advice. We will also compare advice in daily life and advice in the workplace. By the end of this presentation, we hope everyone can better understand how to give advice in a way that is respectful, thoughtful, and effective.
First, let us talk about what advice actually is. Advice is usually defined as a suggestion that is given to help someone improve a situation or make a better decision. On the surface, advice sounds helpful and positive. However, advice also carries personal opinions and values. When we give advice, we are often sharing what we think is the best choice, but the listener may have different experience, different priorities, or different emotions at that moment. This difference is where many problems begin.
Advice has two sides. The first side is the practical side. This includes solutions, strategies, and suggestions. The second side is the emotional side. This includes feelings such as respect, pressure, care, or judgment. Very often, people focus too much on the practical side and forget about the emotional side. That is why people sometimes say, I know you mean well, but this sentence usually means the advice was logical, but emotionally uncomfortable.
Giving advice is difficult because people value independence. Most people want to feel that they are capable of making their own decisions. When advice sounds too direct, it can feel like an order instead of suction. This can create resistance even if the advice itself is good. Another reason is that advice often comes at the wrong time. When someone is emotional or stressed, they may want empathy first, not solutions.
There is also the issue of relationship distance. Advice from a close friend may feel different from advice from a stranger. Advice from someone in a higher position may feel more pressuring than advice from an equal. Because of these reasons, giving advice is not just about language, but also about relationships and context. Understanding this complexity is the first step to giving better advice.
Types of advice. Now, let us look at the first type of advice: direct advice. Direct advice use clear and strong language, such as "you should" or "you need to." For example, "you should study more," and "you need to manage your time better." Direct advice is intense and clear. It is often used in emergencies or situations that require quick action. However, direct advice can also sound harsh or controlling.
The second type is indirect advice. Indirect advice uses softer language, such as "you could" or "maybe you can." For example, "maybe you should try studying a little earlier." The third type is softened advice. Softened advice often includes personal opinions, such as "I think," "I feel," or "I was wondering if." Although the message is similar, the emotional effect is very different. Softened advice often feels more respectful and caring.
Now, let us move on to daily life situations. Imagine a friend who is stressed about exam. If we immediately give advice, the friends may feel that their emotions are being ignored. Instead, acknowledging their feelings first can make the advice easier to accept. For example, "I can see that you're really stressed. Maybe taking a short break could help." This shows understanding before offering advice.
Another daily life situation is poor time management. When someone is always late, direct advice can easily sound like criticism. Instead of saying, "You are always late," we can say, "I used to have the same problem, and setting reminders really helped me." Sharing personal experience makes the advice feel less judgmental.
In the workplace, advice becomes even more sensitive. Professional relationships require polite and respectful language. Direct advice may damage teamwork or creative tension between co-workers. Indirect advice helps maintain harmony while still addressing the issue.
Giving advice to a boss is especially challenging because of power distance. Direct advice may seem disrespectful. Indirect and softened advice allows employees to express ideas without threatening authority. This communication skill is very important in professional environments.
Culture also plays an important role in giving advice. Some cultures value directness and honesty. Other cultures value harmony and indirect communication. Understanding this difference helps us avoid misunderstandings.
Good advice requires empathy. It requires us to think about how our words will be received. Advice is not about being right, but about being considerate.
你看，
Nicole, could you share with us two personal experiences that had a big impact on you?
Today, I'd like to share two experiences that left a strong impression on me. The first is my very first large-scale project, and the second is a special trip I took. These two experiences taught me a lot and helped me understand myself better. I will share the details, the challenges, and what I learned, so you can feel what I went through at the time.
Let's start with your first broad project. Can you introduce it to us?
The project was a team design competition at school. We had to create a full city planning model, including buildings, transportation, and public facilities. My role was to design building facades and do some 3D modeling. There were 5 people in our team, each responsible for different parts. It was my first time joining such a big project, so I felt really nervous at first. I worried that if I didn't do well, I would slow the team down.
What was the biggest challenge you faced in this project?
The biggest challenge was managing time and dealing with technological difficulties. I wasn't familiar with 3D modeling software yet, so I spent a lot of time learning the tools, and sometimes my models would have errors. Another challenge was difference in design ideas within the team. We had to constantly discuss and adjust. Sometimes I felt frustrated and doubted myself, but I reminded myself to stay clean. Break problems into smaller parts and complete what I could before discussing the next steps with the team.
How did you overcome these challenges?
I learned to co- cooperate and ask for help. When I had technical problems, I watched tutorials and asked team members for advice. We also set up daily progress meetings so everyone knew the current status and next steps. Through this, I realized that even a big train could be slowed step by step. In the end, our model was successfully complete, and our teachers and classmates were appreciated. That sense of achievement is something I still remember vivid.
What was the biggest takeaway from this project?
I learned patient communication and time management. More importantly, I learned that when facing difficulties, it's better to break down the problem and tackle it step by step rather than avoid it. This experience also gave me confidence later whenever I faced challenges. I knew I could find ways to handle them. Sam, could you share a personal experience where small talk make a big difference in your daily life?
Absolutely. One experience that stands out happened at a local cafe. I was sitting alone, working on my laptop, and someone sat at the table next to me. I noticed they had a coffee that looked unique, so I casually said, "That looks really good. What flavor is it?" At first, it felt awkward. I didn't know them, and I wasn't sure if they wanted to talk. There was a short pause where I wasn't sure whether to continue or stay quiet. But they smiled and told me about the cafe, and then asked me what I was working on. That small question about coffee eventually led to a longer conversation about favorite cafes, hobbies, and even weekend plans. I was surprised by how something so simple could grow into a meaningful connection. It showed me that small talk isn't just filler conversation. It's a bridge to connect with people and create relationships.
That sounds great. Were there any challenges during that conversation?
Yes, definitely. The hardest part was my own nervousness. I worried I might say something boring or annoying, and I wasn't sure how the other person would react. I remember pausing after my first comment, wondering, should I keep talking or am I bothering them? What helped me was focusing on listening rather than worrying about what to say next. I start asking open-ended questions like, do you come here often? Or which cafe do you usually go to? That gave them space to share their thoughts, and it made the conversation flow naturally. I also reminded myself that awkward pauses are all normal in small talk. They don't mean the conversation is failing. Once I accept that, I feel calmer and more confident.
How did you keep the conversation going beyond the first question?
After the icebreaker, I noticed we had shared interests. Let me, for example, they mentioned loving novels. I also enjoy reading, and I asked, which book are you reading right now? That led to a discussion about favorite authors, story genres, and recommendations. I also shared a little about my weekend plans. That encouraged them to open up more, and the conversation started to feel more like a friendly exchange than just small talk. I also pay attention to nonverbal cues, smiling, nodding, and keeping eye contact. That made the conversation feel natural and engaging. I learned that small talk works best when you balance speaking and listening, sharing genuine interest without forcing it.
How did that conversation make you feel?
At first, I was anxious, but as the conversation continued, I started feeling a connection, even though we were strangers. I felt like I was sharing a small, meaningful moment with someone. I also felt proud of myself for stepping out of my comfort zone. Normally, I wouldn't start a conversation with a stranger, but I did, and it turned out positive. That gave me confidence to try initiating small talks in other situations. like on public transport, at stores, or even in class. It was a small experience, but it made me realize that taking that first step is often the hardest part, but also the most rewarding.
What lessons did you take away from this experience about small talk?
I learned that small talk is not just about talking, it's about connecting, it's about showing interest, building trust, and creating a friendly atmosphere. I also realized the importance of body language and tone. Smiling, nodding, leaning slightly forward. All these little cues help the conversation feel welcoming. Another important lesson is reading the situation. You need to notice if the other person is open to talking or prefers to be left alone. That's part of being a good communicator. I also learned the value of open ended questions. Asking, "Do you like this cafe?" is fine. But asking, "Which cafe do you usually like and why?" encourages a longer, more interesting response.
What advice would you give to someone who struggles with small talk?
And I would say start small and stay curious. You don't need to have deep topic. Commenting on the coffee, the weather, or something happening nearby is enough. Focus on listening actively and sharing a little about yourself. That encourages the other person to open up. Don't worry about pauses, they are natural. Sometimes a brief silence gives both people time to think and makes the conversation feel more relaxed. Also, small talks improves with practice. The more you do it, the more comfortable and confident you become. Over time, you will notice it's not just casual chatting, it's a skill that helps you build connections and even make new friends.
Was there anything else memorable about that experience?
Yes, after that cafe conversation, we exchanged contact info and ended up meeting again at a book club. That started from a tiny small talk moment. It really taught me that small interactions can have bigger impacts than we realize. Since then, I try to approach daily small talk with curiosity and openness, whether at coffee shops, on the bus, or even just greeting classmates. It's amazing how much a small comment can open doors.
Inclusion. Giving advice is a complex social skill. It requires awareness, empathy, and careful language choice.
By choosing the right way to give advice, we can build stronger relationships in both daily life and the workplace. Thank you for listening.